College football nerds here to discuss why I'm pissed that Texas fell to 12th in the AP poll. This is kind of a separate rant that we're doing as an offshoot from our top 10 video. We did a review of the LSU-Texas game, so you can see how our breakdown of that, kind of how we felt about that game. And we've also got a top 10 video that we're doing this week that we don't normally do, so you might want to check that out. But right now, Josh, we're going to discuss why I'm pissed, and maybe you're pissed. I haven't talked to you about it yet. I want to get your feelings kind of live on air. That Texas moved to 12th, and I think that I tweeted about this earlier, and if I tweeted about it, then it must be important. This thing that the voters do where we have a preseason poll that's based on nothing. It's vapor. It's all based on last year and, you know, what's in Lindy's magazine and all that. That's your preseason poll. Then we have 2 weeks of actual data, and we reshuffle based on the preseason poll, not based on what we see on the field with our eyeballs, because it's like they got to keep the original poll honest. And then to top that all off, we only vote with we don't vote with our eyes. We vote with who won and who lost. If you lost, you go down. If you win, you go up. If you win by 1 point over an FCS school, you can stay in the top 10. If you lose by 1 point to the number one team in the country, then we're going to drop you 4 spots. I think that is absolutely ridiculous. And this is what happened to Texas. So LSU moves up to 4. I'm okay with that. I actually have them number 1 right now. LSU moves up to 4. And Texas drops 3 spots because they lost by 1 score to the number 4 team in the country. This is insane to me. So are you telling me, if you're a pollster, that you honestly think that Utah or Michigan or Florida or Auburn right now will beat Texas on a neutral field? I don't think so, but Josh, I'm giving you opportunity to tell me that I'm being ridiculous, or you can agree with me.
I feel like I have to agree with you. Right now, I don't know how many people watched Auburn against Tulane. If you honestly think that Auburn would beat Texas right now, you are out of your ever-loving mind. Because I watched Auburn, and I watched Florida, and I watched Michigan, and I've watched them in the openers too. Those teams have not put up a performance that looked capable of beating Texas in either of the first 2 games. And yes, I know Auburn beat Oregon, and we want to reward them for beating Oregon. And yeah, I get that. But, and it's a big but, 1, Oregon may or may not be a great team. We don't know. But what I just saw from them in the past 2 games is a quarterback that threw for 33% in the first game and threw for under 50% in the second game. They're not scoring a ton of points. And Texas would put up a ton of points on Auburn, and they would win that game. I feel fairly confident of it if they played today. It is exactly what you said. We're obsessed with win-loss records. We're obsessed with where teams were ranked at the time. Yeah, I mean, Texas is ahead of Penn State and Wisconsin, which is itself kind of funny because Penn State's done nothing but look dominant, as has Wisconsin, and they're behind Auburn, Florida, and Michigan. And I know a lot of people know that our channel used to be SEC fans, and sometimes people sort of view us as homers. I'm sitting here right now and saying I look at Texas and Penn State and Wisconsin at 12, 13, and 14, and I don't really know why in the world Auburn, Florida, and Michigan are ranked ahead of them based off what's happened in the field. I just don't see it.
And, you know, it's okay if you want to reward Auburn and you want to reward Florida with ugly wins over what we thought might be good teams coming into the season. That's fine. But as each week progress and we get more data, we need to adjust based on that data. And what we're trying to do here is say, okay, the preseason ranking and the win, because we thought Miami might be better. We thought Oregon might be really good. So these wins are a big deal. So we want to reward you for that. The problem is Miami just lost to North Carolina. Oregon was dominating against a scrub team, but Auburn also struggled with a G5 team that we don't know how good they are or not. But they were a G5 team. A top 10 team that struggles that much on offense against Tulane should not be. That's all I'm saying. And this is not an anti-Auburn thing. Auburn's got plenty of time to work their way back into the rankings if they keep winning and keep beating people. But people keep making excuses for this Auburn offense. And look, we're under this live fire. These are live bullets firing right now. And Auburn's offense looks like it's always done when they go 8-5 or 7-6 or whatever. They're not a top 10 team right now. So to have Texas fall behind them just because Texas happened to play LSU in a weekend where Auburn played Tulane, to me, isn't fair.
I agree, and to me, it really comes down to one simple thing, and that's one: which of the two teams, if they played right now, do you think would win the game? And I think my answer right now is Texas, and it's not close. Two, at the end of the season, which team do you think is going to have the more impressive record? And I think the answer to me is Texas, and it's not close. So the only reason that Auburn is ahead of Texas is they currently have a 2-0 record versus a 1-1 record. And I would say where they're based, it's hard to really blame the preseason polls, right? Because Auburn jumped up a lot. But basically, we're saying, well, Auburn has earned it because of the Oregon win. But that's based off solely the philosophy of you're ranked based off the total value of all your wins you have right now, not how good your team is, not what your win-loss record is going to look like later. And that's kind of a weird way to look at it. I think when you look long-term in the season, I don't think Auburn would beat Texas, and I don't think Auburn's record is going to be good enough to beat Texas. So we basically have them ranked where they are with the full expectation that they're going to be ranked much lower at the end of the year, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, and you mentioned that we're not being SEC homers here, but I do want to use SEC as an example, and namely Alabama as an example, where when Alabama beats teams, those teams tumble in the rankings. And I always wonder, okay, well, all the teams that they flew past, if that team happened to be playing Alabama that weekend, do you think they would have done better? Because that's, like you said, it's kind of a little different spin on whether you think these two teams will beat one another. Okay, Texas, it's one thing to say, do you think Texas would beat Auburn right now? I think they would. Do you think Texas would beat Utah or Michigan right now? I think they would. It's also another thing to say, if Michigan was playing LSU Saturday, to have them ranked ahead of Texas right now, you think they would have done better against LSU than a one-score win. And anybody who saw that Michigan Army game with that terrible offense knows that Michigan would get just destroyed by LSU right now. And I think they'd lose by 2 touchdowns to Texas.
Again, I don't disagree with it. I mean, it's just the short statement that the only reason those teams are ranked ahead, and again, you can give Auburn the example from the fact that they won it with Oregon, but Michigan is truly ranked ahead of Texas by default at the moment. I mean, they haven't done anything to earn that spot over Texas other than not play anyone remotely as good as LSU, and managed to not lose in overtime to Army. So, it's baffling to me. I don't think it's really defensible. And to me, it's the pollster saying, oh, yeah, we know Texas is going to end up ranked ahead of them. But even though we know it, we believe they should be, we believe they will be, we're just not going to rank them there. We're going to wait and then move them up because, the poll is something that you sort of weirdly earn over time rather than an actual statement of where we think the teams are in terms of quality and where we think they're actually going to end up in terms of record.
And it's this thinking that we touched on in the beginning that a win is always better than a loss. And I just absolutely disagree with this. If Texas is playing Ohio State Saturday and loses by 1 point, and Michigan goes to overtime with an Army team that's not as good as last year's Army team, to me, the overtime win versus a bad Army team is worse. Is far worse than losing by 1 point to Ohio State right now. That's just how I feel. Anything else on this ridiculous Texas ranking thing that I'm missing? I know we got a lot of Oklahoma fans too, and I want to say this. Like, they're going to say that we're all of a sudden Texas fans or whatever. This is just the team that happened to have this happen to them too. That's a weird, a lot of jumbling there. But this happened to Texas. It could have happened to anybody. It happens to teams all throughout the year, every year. And it just pisses me off. And I want to see it stop. And it's not stopping. Anything else about this?
I think the last thing, and you hit it with Oklahoma's sort of there by default, but it really establishes that we penalize losses more than we give credit for wins or for quality. And this really strongly discourages teams from scheduling these kinds of valuable games because you're penalized so much for losses. And yeah, LSU gets a ton of credit for winning, but in this playoff structure, and personally, this is why I don't love large-scale playoff expansion. It's so easy to get in the playoff if you play a really weak schedule in a Power 5 conference and you have one loss or less. State. Yeah, it's easy to get in that scenario. So I don't, I think punishing losses isn't nearly as valuable as rewarding teams for quality wins. You got to really be very careful about punishing team. And I will say, maybe as a final point here, if the playoff committee rankings came out right now, I virtually guarantee you Texas would be ranked much higher than they are in the AP. The AP would cry about it, but the playoff committee would be absolutely right because they have been far more consistent about rewarding you for playing difficult games and not penalizing you for losing to really good teams, but penalizing you for losing to bad ones.
This was a fun rant. It's something that's near and dear to our heart, this whole lazy AP voter thing. It's been a ridiculous issue for years. I wish I could say call your congressman and we could do something about it, but we can't. We're stuck with it. But thankfully, like Josh said, the playoff committee does a lot better job of looking deeper at this instead of just spitting out a ballot. This is the last thing about this. I saw somebody had Washington at like 11th on their AP ballot. They apparently went to sleep before the game was over and put their ballot in before the game was over, like because of the lightning delay. I think that's ridiculous, but it's a perfect example of what we're dealing with right here. All right, y'all, make sure to watch our top 10 video. And if you're a Texas fan or just like watching us talk about football, we got a bunch of other stuff coming out, review of the Texas LSU game, Alabama, South Carolina preview, blah, 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 blah. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week, and God bless.